Hello there, lads. It's me, your Uncle Walt. How you doing this morning? As I'm recording this, I'm in my library in a beautiful, chilly Sunday morning. And I decided that there's something that I wanted to do with you guys, which is to read a small book. We may not be reading the full book in one sitting, but we'll make small videos until we're done finished, reading the book. And I decided that there is this book that I like that has some very nice lessons about life that I want you to know and to read along with me, all right? The book is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. So let's read this book, all right? This is The Little Prince. This is the Little Prince himself. He was a blonde dude. He's short. There's something about a rose and the stars and the fox. And we'll learn all about that during the course of this video, hopefully, while we read the book, because it's going to be several parts, right? So let's begin reading about this Little Prince. So, in the first chapter, there is some sir talking about his experience, and we'll learn about him, all right? So, first chapter. When I was 6 years old, I once saw a magnificent picture in a book on the virgin forest called Stories of Life. It was a boa constrictor that had swallowed a wild beast. Here is a copy of the drawing. Check this out. Check the drawing. This is a boa constrictor eating a beast. It says, it was written in the book that boa constrictors swallow their whole prey without chewing it. Then they cannot move, and they sleep during the 6 months of their digestion. Then I thought a lot about the adventures of the jungle, and in turn succeeded with a colored pencil in drawing my very first drawing, and it was like this. Let me show you what the drawing was like. This was the drawing. You see it? I then showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups, and I asked them if my drawing frightened them. And they said, why would a hat be scary? A hat. It sort of looks like a hat, doesn't it? He then says, my drawing was not of a hat. It was a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. I then drew the inside of the boa constrictor so that the grown-ups could understand. They always required more explanation. So my second drawing was like this. This is what the boa constrictor looked like when it swallowed an elephant. Look. It was not a hat. You see the elephant? And this is the head of the snake, of the boa constrictor. The grown-ups advised me to leave aside the drawings of boa constrictors from the outside or the inside, and to interest myself instead in geography, history, calculus, or grammar. So, at the age of 6, I abandoned a magnificent career as a painter. I had been discouraged by the failure of my first drawing and my second drawing. Grown-ups never understood anything on their own, and it is tiring for children to always have to give them explanations. So I had to choose another profession. I learned to fly planes. I flew all over the world. And geography, that's right, served me very well. I knew how to recognize at first glance where China was or Arizona. It is useful if you have gone astray during the night. I've had in the course of my life a lot of contact with many serious people. I have lived amongst the grown-ups. I saw them up close. It did not really improve my opinion of them. When I met one that seemed to me a little lucid, I had them experience my drawing number one, which I had preserved. He kept the drawing. I wanted to know if they could come to a real understanding, but they always replied, "It's a hat." After that, I spoke to them neither of boa constrictors, nor of virgin forests, nor of stars. I put myself within reach. I talked about bridge or golf or politics or ties, and the grown-ups were always glad to know such a reasonable man, meaning him, right? The narrator, that he was such a fine man because he always wanted to talk about what they talk about. Okay, chapter number 2. So I lived alone with no one to talk to until a breakdown in the Sahara Desert 6 years ago. The Sahara Desert, that's in Africa. Something had broken in my engine because he was flying a plane, let's remember. And since I had neither a mechanic nor a passenger with me, I prepared to try by myself to make a difficult reprieve. It was a matter of life and death. I had hardly any water to drink for a week. The first night, I fell asleep on the sand 1,000 miles away from any inhabited land. I was much more isolated than a castaway on a raft in the middle of the ocean. Then you imagine my surprise at dawn when a funny little voice woke me up. The voice said, "Hey, please draw me a sheep." Hey, draw me a sheep. I jumped on my feet as if I had been struck by lightning. I rubbed my eyes well. I watched, and I saw a very extraordinary little man who looked at me gravely. This is the best portrait I later managed to make of him. This is the portrait of the little man. But my drawing, of course, is much less ravishing than the actual model, and it is not my fault. I had been discouraged in my career as a painter by the grown-ups at the age of 6, and I had learned nothing to draw except closed boa constrictors and open boa constrictors. I looked at this apparition with my eyes full of astonishment. Do not forget that I was 1,000 miles away from any inhabited region. Now, my little fellow seemed to me neither astray, nor dead of fatigue, or dead of hunger, nor death of thirst, nor dead of fear. He had not the appearance of a child lost in the middle of the desert, 1,000 miles away from any inhabited region. So when I finally succeeded in speaking, I said to him, "What are you doing here?" And he repeated to me very gently, as a very serious thing, "Please, draw me a sheep." When the mystery is too impressive, we do not dare to disobey. As absurd as it seems to me, 1,000 miles from all inhabited places and in danger of death, I took out my pocket, a sheet of paper, and a pen. But I remembered that I had studied geography and history and calculus and grammar, and I told the little fellow, with a little bad humor, that I did not know how to draw. And he replied, "It doesn't matter. Draw me a sheep." As I had never drawn a sheep, I thought of him as one of the only 2 drawings of which I was capable. That of the boa closed, and now I was astounded to hear the little fellow reply, No, I do not want an elephant in a boa. A boa is very dangerous, and an elephant is very cumbersome. My place is tight. I need a sheep. Draw me a sheep." And then I drew. Check out the drawing. This is the sheep. You see the sheep? It's right there. He then looked attentively and said, No, that one is already very ill. Draw another one. And then I drew another one. And this was the other drawing. You see? He then looked attentively and said, No, that one is already very ill. Do another one. And then I drew again. And this is what the third sheep looked like. My friend smiled gently and indulgently said, You see, it's not a sheep, that's a ram because he has horns. So I still refused my drawing, but he was refused like the preceding ones. No, this one is too old. I want a long-lived sheep. Then, for lack of patience, and I was anxious to begin the dismantling of my engine, I scribbled this very small drawing. And this was a drawing. You see? And it says, That's the box. The sheep that you want is in that box. But I was surprised to see the face of my young judge that was illuminated. Yes, that is exactly how I wanted it. Do you think that sheep are to be found in this country? Why? Because at home it's very small. Well, surely that will suffice. I gave you a tiny sheep. He then leaned his head toward the drawing. No, not as small as that. He fell asleep. And so I made the acquaintance of the little prince. That is how they met. So let's read chapter 3, okay? It took me a long time to understand where he came from. The little prince, who asked me many questions, never seemed to hear mine. These are words spoken by chance that, little by little, have all revealed to me. So when he saw my plane for the first time, I will not draw my plane. It is a drawing too complicated for me. When he saw my plane, he asked me, What is that thing? Look, it's not a thing. It flies. It's a plane. This is my plane. And I was proud to tell him that I was flying. He then exclaimed, How? Have you fallen from heaven? I said modestly, Yes. He replied, Oh, now that's funny. And the little prince had a very pretty burst of laughter, which irritated me very much. I wished to take my misfortune seriously. He then added, then you too come from heaven. What planet are you from? I caught a glimpse in the mystery of his presence, and I suddenly questioned, Wait, so you're from another planet? But he did not answer me. He nodded softly as he looked at my plane. It's true that you cannot come very far from it. He sank into a reverie that lasted for a long time. Then, taking my sheep out of his pocket, he plunged into the contemplation of his treasure. You can imagine how intrigued I was by this half-confidence about the other planets. I therefore endeavored to learn more. Where do you come from, my little fellow? Where is at home for you? Where do you want to take my sheep? He then replied after a meditative silence, because he was doing meditation, so there was silence. He meditated and then replied, What is good with the box you gave me is that at night it will serve the sheep as a small house. I then replied, Of course, and if you are kind, I will also give you a rope to tie it up during the day and a picket. And the proposal seemed to shock the little prince. Attach it? Tie it? What a funny idea. Then I replied, But if you do not tie him, he will go anywhere and then he'll get lost. And my friend burst into laughter again. The little prince just started laughing. But where do you want him to go? Anywhere, like right in front of where we are. And then the little prince gravely remarked, It does not matter. It's so small at home. He was talking about the sheep going back to his home. And with a little melancholy perhaps, the little prince then added, "Straight ahead you cannot go very far where I'm from." So this is a little drawing of the little prince on his house, which is Asteroid B612. Check this out. You see, that's an asteroid. He lives in a very small place. So even if the sheep started walking forward, it would not get lost very far away because the planet is very small. Okay, let's read one last chapter, chapter number 4. I had learned the second very important thing, that its original planet was scarcely larger than a house. It could not surprise me much. I knew that besides the big planets like the Earth or Jupiter or Mars or Venus, which have been given names, there are hundreds of others that are sometimes so small that it is very hard for them to be seen by a telescope. When an astronomer discovers one of them, he names it as a number. He calls it, for example, Asteroid 3251. You see, this is an astronomer. Let's check it out. This is an astronomer looking at the stars with a telescope. This right here. I have serious reasons to believe that the planet from which the little prince came from is the asteroid B612. This asteroid was seen only once in the year 1909 by a Turkish astronomer in the telescope. He had then made a great demonstration of his discovery at an international astronomy congress, but nobody believed him because of his costume. Big people are like that. They disregard other people because of how they dress. But this is like a small illustration of how it happened. He was explaining what he saw. He was explaining that he saw the asteroid, but nobody believed him because of how he was dressed. Fortunately for the reputation of asteroid B612, where the little prince lived, a Turkish dictator imposed on his people, under penalty of death, to dress in a European fashion. So the astronomer resumed his demonstration in 1920 with a very elegant dress. At this time, everyone was of his opinion. They finally heard him because he was dressed differently. If I have told you these details about asteroid B612, and if I have given you its number, it is because of the big people. Big people like the numbers. So when you tell them about a new friend, they never question you about the basics. They never tell you, what's the sound of his voice? What games does he prefer? Does he collect butterflies? They always ask, hey, how old is he? How many brothers? How much does he weigh? How much does his father earn in a year? Then they only think they know him because of the numbers. So, if you say to the grown-ups, I saw a beautiful pink brick house with geraniums in the window and doves on the roof, they cannot imagine this house. We must say to them, I have seen a house of 100,000 francs. And then they would cry, oh, it is very pretty then. So if you tell them, the proof that the little prince existed is that he was delightful, that he laughed, that he wanted a sheep. When you want a sheep, it is proof that you exist. They will shrug their shoulders and treat you as a child. But if you tell them, hey, he came from a planet which is asteroid B612, then they will be convinced. And they will leave you alone with their questions because adults are like that. We can't blame them. Children should be very lenient towards adults. But of course, we who understand life, we make fun of the numbers. I would have liked to start this story like fairy tales. I would have liked to say, once upon a time, there was a little prince who lived on a planet hardly larger than himself and who needed a friend. For those who understand life, it would have seemed much more true. Because I do not like to read my book lightly. I feel so sorry to recount these memories. It's been 6 years since my friend went away with his sheep. If I try to describe it here, it is so as not to forget it. It's sad to forget a friend. Not everyone has had a friend. And I can become like the grown-ups who are interested only in numbers. So that is why I bought a box of colors and pencils. It's hard to go back to drawing at my age when no other attempt has been ever made than that of a closed boa and that of an open boa at the age of 6. I will try, of course, to make the portraits as resembling as possible. Like, for example, this other portrait about the astronomer who then changed his clothes. He's trying his best. But I'm not quite sure I'm going to succeed at being good at drawing the portraits. One drawing goes and the other one does not look like it should anymore. So I make some errors also on the sides, on the size. For example, the little prince is a little bit too big in the ones that I showed you. And in the other small drawings, he's too small. And sometimes I'm not even sure about the color of his costume. Then I fumbled like this and that as best I could. At last, I shall be mistaken about some important details, but that will have to be forgiven, because my friend never gave me an explanation. He thought that I might be like him, but I unfortunately do not know how to see the sheep through the crates. I may be a little bit like the grown-ups, because I must have gotten older. So that's the end of chapter 4. We have read chapters 1 through 4, and I showed you all the drawings about, let's remember, the little prince. So, in summary, there was this man flying his plane, and his plane got broken down and fell into the desert. And when he woke up, he had a new friend, the little prince. So they're talking about drawing sheep. Okay, so at a later date, I will show you more chapters of this book. But for now, how about you guys try to send me a drawing of how you would draw a little sheep? That would be very nice. I'll be waiting for that. It's very nice to see you guys. Love you, Uncle Walt. Peace out. We'll talk later.